Hey guys, we are back with Genesis chapter 4. This is still the first book of the Bible, but the fourth chapter. And I want to talk through the whole chapter. I'm going to take a section of, a section of text out, talk about that separately. But we are effectively going to cover verses 1 through 26. There's going to be a little block that I'm going to pull out, but we'll talk about that when we get there. This is the first recorded murder. And so we're going to talk through this. The Bible has it all. It's all in here. And so we're going to get into the murder part of this. So starting off in Genesis chapter 4, verses 1. It says, the man knew his wife, Eve. Remember, he named her Eve. And she conceived and bore Cain. Cain is the first of their children that is born, the first of their sons. And then she had his brother Abel. And so now Cain and Abel are brothers. They are grown men at this point. And Abel is a keeper of sheep. Cain is a tiller of the ground, or a farmer. He can grow things. So he tends to work in produce and have a harvest and things like that, whilst Abel is tending sheep and is a shepherd and kind of working with animals. So in verse 3, it says, after a time they came and they brought an offering. Cain brought fruit of the ground. It just says fruit of the ground. It doesn't say first fruit. It doesn't say best fruit. It just says fruit of the ground. And for Abel, he brought the firstlings of his flock, meaning the first and best of the flock that has come. So these are new lambs that have come, and he has brought their fat portions, and they are being offered up as an offering or a sacrifice to God. And the Lord liked Abel's offering. Abel is the second son. He liked his offering. But for Cain, he didn't like it that much. He was not pleased with just fruit of the ground. And so Cain got mad. Cain got mad and his countenance changed. It says his countenance fell. And that's his kind of overall demeanor, his attitude, the way he looked and carried himself. Like he got an attitude. He was hot under the collar. And so God spoke to Cain. Imagine, we talk about it sometimes, if God would come every morning, sit on the edge of my bed and be like, hey, here's the plan for the week. That would be fantastic. He had that level of relationship with God. And God called out to him in verse 6, and God said to him, not yelled across a field, not thunder and lightning, not spoke to a prophet and the prophet came, but literally God said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your countenance changed? Why have you gotten mad? Why you look like this? You look like you got a problem. I'm seeing there's an issue. You good, man? And so he said to him, if you do well, won't you be accepted? If you had given me what I asked for, wouldn't I have accepted it? This is not an Abel problem. This is a Cain problem. If you had done what I asked you to do, wouldn't I have accepted it? If you had given me your best, if you had given me your first in the way that he did, would I have not accepted it? This isn't a everybody else problem. This is a you problem, Cain. And he said, look, I see your anger and there's sin lurking at your door. You are right on the edge of making a foolish decision. And this anger wants to overtake you. But you can master this. You can right now decide that I'm not going to give into this anger. I'm not going to let this thing get to me, and I'm going to fix it and I'm going to get it right. But you have to do that. And God is warning him. He is giving him an understanding that, hey, I see something in you that's getting ready to go bad, and I want you to take the time to make sure that it's right. Get yourself together before you make a very foolish decision. And so in verse 8, immediately after God says what he had to say, Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go for a walk. Let's go on out to the field. And so as soon as they get out there, it says, when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Cain killed his brother because God accepted his sacrifice. He was mad at the wrong person about something. And instead of heeding the warning, instead of holding the conversation with the person, and talking back to God and getting himself together, he gave into that anger, and that anger changed his life. And so he took his brother's life. This is the first record of murder in the Bible. We 4 chapters in and we already killing people. So in verse 9, God says to Cain, again, he ain't yell across the field, he ain't send a message to him. He said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And instead of him understanding that God told me something was going to happen like this if I didn't listen, instead of him correcting in the way that he needed to correct, instead of him asking for forgiveness and like, you know what, God, you told me this thing was going to tear me to pieces and it got me and I need to get myself together. Instead of falling on the mercy of God, he was like, I don't know what that got to do with me. I'm not in charge of him. That's his business. You figure out where he at. I ain't got nothing to do with that. He said, am I my brother's keeper? Am I in charge of him? How am I supposed to know? And God said, what'd you do? Listen. Your brother's blood is calling out to me. I know what you did. I'm asking just because I was giving you an opportunity to get right. I was giving you an opportunity to fess up and be honest. But you decided you was just going to go all the way in. And you got slick with me. I don't know where he at. You know exactly where he is, where you left him. And so in verse 11, he said, and now you're cursed from the ground. In chapter 3, God cursed the ground so that it would not just give up a harvest, that it would have to be worked for. And here, God has cursed Cain so that even though you got to work at the ground, it's still not going to work for you. Your hands are going to be tainted and make stuff die. It's not going to grow the way it should grow. It's going to be even harder because this is the very ground that you allowed your brother's blood to spill into. And it says you're not going to be able to get this. And on top of that, in verse 12, it says that you're going to be a fugitive and a wanderer. Some versions say vagabond. You're going to be a wanderer, a fugitive. You're going to be a wanted man. You're going to have to live your life on the run. You'll never have peace. This is not going to be easy for you. I'm not going to kill you for killing your brother. I'm going to let you live with this. You will live a life of exile. You will always be on the run. You will always looking over your shoulder, worried. You will always have an absence of the family that you had because you didn't value it. You threw it away. And so in verse 13, Cain was like, come on, God, that's harsh. That's too much. It's too much. How am I supposed to live under this? You've taken away the very thing that worked well for me. You've driven me away from the soil. You've kicked me out of the thing that worked for me. My one gift, my one skill you took back. And I'll be hidden from your face. Now I'm a fugitive. I'm a wanderer. Everybody who meets me is going to know that I murdered my brother and they're going to want to kill me. And I no longer have you to run to. I no longer can escape into the safe place that God is. I no longer have a very present help that's going to come. I no longer have the joy and the peace and the strength of God. I am literally on my own out here. And God was like, they going to kill me. What am I going to do? And God was like, nah, they're not going to kill you, homie. They're not going to kill you. I'm going to mark you so that they'll know that they can't kill you. And anybody who does, if somebody goes against what I'm saying, 7 times what they do to you is going to come back on them. So they're going to leave you alone because don't nobody want that. But you're going to be on your own. You're going to live your life without me. You're going to live your life without your family. You're going to live your life without the parents and the structure and everything. You're going to live your life struggling to do the thing that was easy for you because you allowed this sin to overtake you. You allowed your anger to get the best of you. Guard yourselves, people, so that you're not letting your anger get the best of you. We have all let our anger get the best of us and got ourselves into some hot water. We done lost jobs behind running our mouths because you're not going to talk to me that kind of way. We've lost opportunities because our mouths got in the way, because we let our anger overtake us and we did not know who was watching and who saw and how it was affecting people. Guard your anger. Do not allow it to overtake you. And when you find yourself in a situation where you're getting hot under the collar, when you start to see red and black or whatever color it is you see, pray. You better call God into that. God, I have a situation where my flesh is doing too much. This anger is getting me. My countenance is changing, and I need you to help me because I'm losing control, and you can help me keep control. I'm stronger than this. I'm better than this, and I need your strength right now. So in verse 16, it says that Cain went away and he settled away from the presence of the Lord. He found a different space where he could just go be by himself. He could no longer be in a space where God was. That's hard, man. That's hard because we've been able to survive by going to God in prayer. We've been able to survive by going to the Lord and pulling on him and finding a safe place. And he doesn't have that anymore. So God was speaking to him, holding conversations with him, and he doesn't get that anymore. And so he has a wife. And in verse 17, he has a son, Enoch, and he builds a city and names the city Enoch after his son. Okay. So verses 18 through 22. 18 through 22 give us a kind of bloodline of the descendants of Cain. And I like to talk about this and point it out because I've been taught that everything that came out of Cain because he was cursed is cursed. And so therefore, nothing good ever came out of that. But God still introduced gifts into the world. God still introduced, after several generations of his line, that he still introduced music into the world. He still introduced ironwork and brasswork into the world. That's artistry. That's craftsmanship. He still has, they said tents and livestock, that they're ancestors of those who live in tents and livestock and have livestock. So these sons of Cain, grandsons, great-grandsons, great on down, they were still people that God used. They were still people that God introduced gifts into the world and were able to make things new and make things different. God didn't abandon them because of who their ancestors were. I had been taught some time ago that depending on who your ancestors were was dependent on, how close you was going to get to God and how far you were going to go, because God had cursed some people and you were cursed forever. There is redemption for all of us. There is never a time or a place or a person that is beyond God's reach or beyond who he can be. He is still introducing gifts. He is still introducing talents. He is still calling you. You are never in a space where, my great-great-grandmother was this type of person, so I can't do this. Or my mama was this type of person, so I can't be. God wants you. There's nothing that someone above you that you probably never even met did that could take you outside of what God has for you. And what he has for you is a loving relationship as a parent. You can still be brought into his house. You can still be adopted into the faith. So do not allow yourself to believe that because somebody before you did something or said something or was a particular type of person that you cannot yourself get right and be accepted by God. You can. You got to get right and be accepted by God. So those gifts and talents were still introduced. They were not cursed. Music is not cursed because we got music inside the church. God talks about singing and dancing and playing instruments. These are the very instruments that are being invented or being introduced into the world here. So clearly God has use for them. He did not decide this was cursed just because it came through the line of Cain. That's not what this is. So I am going to skip over verses 23 and 24 because I want to talk about that separately. But verses 25 and 26. Verse 25 and 26 is Adam, or the man from the garden, and Eve, his wife. They get together and they have another son, and they name this son Seth. And Seth is His name is, God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel. God gave me back what I lost. He gave me another son to love because I lost one of my sons. Um, and that was an important thing. That was a kind of point of restoration for her, to have, or for them as a couple, to have a child. For people who have had difficulty or lost a child or something like that, sometimes when you have another child, it's like, okay, God, you really, that rainbow baby. That's what I'm talking about. That rainbow baby. I've lost something and you've given me this back. You've restored my faith. You've restored my peace. You've given me back something that I've lost. Not that this is the same person being reborn, but you've given me something that I lost, and I now get an opportunity to love again. I get, you kind of, chip that ice off my heart that came from the loss that I had. And it talks about in verse 26 that Seth has a son. And so it lets you know that he grew up into adulthood and he had a family. And so they got this kind of full circle restoration there. Because when they lost Abel, they also lost Cain. They lost two sons at once. And it is something that we need to understand. And it's something that we sometimes we miss. But when we talk about how there's a lot of crime or a lot of violence. But the reality is, if we lose one person to violence, the person who committed the act, we lose two. So there's two families that are forever changed. And in this one, because they were brothers, that mom lost a lot. And God gave her something back that restored her faith in her heart, or gave them something back, her and her husband. And so at the end of verse 26, it says, at that time, people began to invoke the name of the Lord. They began to call on the Lord. Now people are going and invoking, or invocation. It's when you call on earnestly. It's when you appeal to. They start to have church, y'all. They start to invite the Lord into spaces. It is them calling out his name and saying, oh God, I need you. God, I want you here. Lord, I am calling you so that you respond and that you come and that you enter into this space. Instead of God coming to them for conversation, they are starting to call on God. And it begins to be a give and take again, a relationship between God and the people. And so we are going to stop there. I'm going to tackle those verses that I pulled out about Lamech in a separate video. So quick recap. Cain and Abel are brothers. They both bring in an offering. Cain is the oldest and he brings fruit of the ground. And Abel is the second and he brings in the first of his flock. And God likes Abel's offering, but does not like Cain's offering. And Cain gets upset. He gets mad about it. He lets his anger take over him. And God warns him, this anger is getting ready to get you and take you somewhere you don't need to go. Check yourself. Get it together. And he does not. And he calls his brother out into a field. He says, let's go for a walk. They get out there and he kills his brother. And when God comes to him, instead of him repenting or owning up to, even admitting what he had done, he was like, I don't know nothing about that. I don't know where my brother is. That's somebody else's business. I'm not in charge of him. I'm not his keeper. And so God punishes him, and he punishes him by sending him out into the world without the covering or relationship with God any longer. And he marks him so that even though he has to live his life in exile, live his life as a fugitive, nobody can kill him. Sometimes the punishment is to live this thing out with the results of your decisions. It is not always God is going to take the thing away when you admit it. It's not always that you're going to die in place of, you're going to die. It's not always that. It's sometimes you're going to live with this thing. You have to live with this. It's going to be reoccurring, and you just going to have to suffer out your days knowing that you did this thing and that it's going to weigh on you. Sometimes that's the punishment. Here's sometimes. And so he moves on. He has a series of children, and in these grandchildren and great-grands, as his lineage moves on, we see that God has not decided that everybody is cursed because of who he was forever. That God still introduces life and love and music and craftsmanship and tool work and all these things through his bloodline into the world. Not because they're bad, but because God is still able to use whoever he wants to use, however he wants to use them. You are not going to be punished forever for whatever somebody else did. You have a right to come to God, and God can use you independent of who your family is. And then God gives the man and the woman from the garden, or Adam and Eve, he gives them a new son. And this son kind of is their rainbow baby in effect. And it gives them the ability to restore their faith and have something back that they lost and kind of make them whole again. And this son is Seth, and he grows up and has his own family. And then from there, people get to calling on the name of the Lord, y'all. They get to having church. And so I pray that you will have a fantastic week, and God bless you all. Goodbye.